Good evening, everyone. My name is Tiffany Holmes. I am a member of the OPAL board. OPAL is the Organization for Positive Action and Leadership. We are a nonprofit that was founded by citizens in the Evanston's Black community in 2014. And we were concerned about underlying issues that were causing the achievement gap. Our mission is to achieve racial equity in Evanston.
Please tell us why you're running for city clerk. And given the clerk's office has had a number of responsibilities stripped from it by the city council over the past 4 years, what are you going to do to restore citizen trust in government? And what are you going to put in place to ensure transparency?
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Mendoza. I'm running for city clerk. I'm running for city clerk because it's the office that very much encompasses a lot of the things that I love to do. One of my passions is community organizing, community advocacy, and working with our community members here in Evanston to help them advocate for themselves and reach services throughout our city. And I want to apply those skills as your hopefully elected clerk. One of the things that I plan to do to ensure that there is transparency in our office is that, well, hopefully the city council will seek to put FOIA officers in the control of the clerk, because I think it's very important for the clerk to be in charge of that, to provide access to the community. And we are part of an elected body, and we can be held accountable by people who are electing us, people who are electing the clerk. And I hope that, residents of Evanston understand that if we have that power within the clerk's office, you also have the power to hold the clerk's office accountable when it's not functioning correctly. I hope to provide language access, which is very important. Evanston really does not have a language access policy, which I know the Equity Committee is now working on. And I've been speaking to some people on that committee to make sure that language access is something that we do have, that it's something that we can be held accountable as a city, that the city can be held accountable for providing that. I also want to provide partnerships with other organizations that can provide technology assistance and access to laptops, like our Evanston Library, and to organizations like the Evanston Community Foundation, who also could provide education. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex and Tiffany and Opal, for hosting this tonight and for having me. I'm running for city clerk because I would like to create an office that is professional and welcoming to all of Evanston's residents and staff and officials. Also, I think that with COVID and as an overriding issue that affects everyone, I think that we need to do our best to create a professional office. And I've had a lot of experience in federal government. I'm a retired federal agent, and I'd like to bring my experience to bear on the office and to work with city council and with the residents to have an open door policy and to answer questions when they're asked of the office. I'd like to make sure that people get their questions answered satisfactorily.
So thank you for the question. The reason why I'm running for city clerk is because I love the city of Evanston, and I currently serve the community as the deputy city clerk. And over the past 4 years, I've seen the potential that the office has to better serve our residents. Over those years, I've also helped to cultivate strong relationships with city staff, elected officials, and members of the community. I want to increase services for the office. I want to advocate for more transparency, and I also want to increase civic engagement. And I think the first step in doing that and bringing back services is having that experience. I've learned the role of the office, the duties and responsibilities. So taking that experience and coupling it with the relationship I've created, I will be able to bring back services into the office, such as passports and real estate transfer stamps. I've also, over the past few months, have collaborated with the city manager's office to reproduce the Spanish newsletter for our residents. And with that, I want to also bring that into the office and implement a language access policy. So that way we can share information to those that have a language barrier. In terms of transparency, I want to ensure that our office is given the responsibility of overseeing police records to build back some of that trust that the residents feel they've lost with their local officials and the city government. I also want to make sure that I continue to advocate for more civic engagement with our residents, partnering up with institutions like the League of Women Voters, the Evanston Public Library to host city voter registration drives to increase participation in our elections and ensure that people are more active in the day-to-day activities of our city government.
So I am running for clerk for the exact reason that you said, to restore, not just restore public trust, but to grow public trust. We, I think one of the most important services that the clerk's office lost was FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. And we can get into, if there's another question, more reasons why that occurred, but that is the top tool that citizens have to transparency, for accountability, but access to information. So, excuse me, so I will be advocating for council and giving them a lot of evidence about why we need to have that service back in the FOIA or in the clerk's office. And I will also be giving access to information that includes regular benchmarks on criminal justice, health, housing, employment, and advancement in Evanston, environmental justice outcomes for across our demographics. I will leave those there as equity benchmarks, and I'll change them as we get records in that show they're changed. You can see the progress. You can see which issues that City Council is addressing and which they are not, which staff are addressing and where they are not, and you can hold them accountable when they implement policy, what they're actually having an effect on. That's not just meant to be punitive, it's meant to be indications of where we're succeeding, who we're serving and who we're not serving. And I believe in evidence-based policy making. So I would like to be providing council packets of information that's well-rounded. So they have full information, again, of who is and is not being served. And that is the opposite of what we're seeing now, which is policy-based evidence making, when you're not going on need and impartial information and community participation, but you are specially commissioning information that supports your position. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Just a couple days ago, the League of Women Voters published a statement to the Evanston Roundtable saying their analysis of 10 other clerks' offices in the area led them to find that city clerks in other communities tend to focus more on administrative tasks than policy. They also highlighted that some Illinois reform groups are calling for the consolidation or elimination of elected positions like this one. While the League did not appear to take a position, they stopped short of that. It begs the question, should the city clerk focus more on administrative tasks or policy, or is that a false choice? And should the city clerk be an elected position? I think these are all questions that sound like they're going to be coming this office's way in the near future.
Well, as far as I know, I believe that about half the city clerks in Illinois are elected and about half are appointed. And I have no problem with them being elected. It's the only independent official that's independent of the mayor. So from that point of view, I like the idea of keeping it an elected office. As far as whether the clerk should focus on policy or administrative matters, I definitely think both. There's no reason that a competent city clerk can't focus on both of those things, especially since many clerks' offices, including Evanston's, has more employees in the office than just the clerk himself or herself. I believe our office right now has 3 employees. So I think policy, the primary policy in Evanston is that's crucial, is that the Evanston city clerk is also the local election official. And I can't think of many things more important than that to our community. And my goal with being the election official would be to go into schools and community centers and help teach young people about the importance of voting, and not just with platitudes, but I'd like to bring in other elected officials so that they can see, maybe as third graders and fourth graders, and then seventh graders and eighth graders, how voting, so that to bring in an alderman or a school board member and to see these people affect your life and your parents' life and your family's life, and show them how to vote and to try to make them voters for life. There are few things in the world, I think, more important right now than being active voters. I think, look at the vote in Georgia here recently, that handful of voters in Georgia who flipped the Senate from Republican to Democrat, changed our country historically. And since we are such a world power, they changed the world. And thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I think that the decision of whether it should be elected or appointed, we should really leave that to the residents and have them decide that. In terms of the role of the city clerk, a lot of its responsibilities are administrative, but at the same time, it doesn't mean it can't be one of advocacy. And so I think as long as the core responsibilities are being done, I think there's room to expand beyond those parameters. In my case, as a current deputy clerk, I've been able to conduct all of those responsibilities effectively. And so I want to continue to push for that, but at the same time, do more outreach from our office. I think not a lot of people are being actively engaged with local government, and I want to go out there, like I mentioned before, and partner up with all these organizations, so that way we can increase civic participation. And also, more importantly, to the point that Cynthia Beebe made, the elections are important, and I've been able to ensure that the residents in this community for the past 4 years had the ability to go out and vote every single time and make sure that their voices were heard. So I think that ultimately it's a decision that falls on the clerk that it's in that position at the time, but it's going to depend on what the vision is for that office. And for me, it's not only taking care of the core responsibility, but also being an advocate for our community at large.
I think it would be a shame to have an appointed clerk. He is, or she is, the only full-time elected position, the only elected office, the only full-time position who ultimately is accountable to voters and not to the city manager. So I see my role less as simply administrative or policy based. It is the information keeper and all of the associated clerk duties, electoral board, judge, those sort of things. But the information keeping is both related to administrative work and to policy. Again, giving information to residents, getting information to council are absolutely critical. And we need that person to be responsible and accountable ultimately to the public and not within the confines of the city administration. Yes, I mean, I think it's a false choice, and I attempted to sort of answer that. It's not a direct policy position. It is already. It is absolutely more administrative and to some degree oversight. And it's keeping minutes, records. Those things are administrative, but they also impact policy if you are able to capture legislative intent and those sort of things, which sometimes get left off minutes, especially closed session minutes.
Hi, I definitely do think that Evanston is a city that values transparency and values the city clerk's office being a elected position. Like I said before, that is something, that's one of the reasons why we have so much loss in trust, because we've seen how the office has been stripped apart over the last 4 years, and that has very much eroded the trust there is between our residents and our city. And that is something that the clerk's office can work to restore. I do believe that the office is very much an administrative position, and it's not there necessarily to create policy, more to help carry out policy and connect Evanstonians to that, to that policy, and have them have an avenue to help, ultimately our elected officials and city create policy that reflects their best interest and, their livability, their ability to stay here in Evanston and live. We have many Evanstonians that have been pushed out of Evanston because decisions and, policies, ordinances are created that very much affect their ability to stay in our city. And, that is a loss to our community. And, another thing is that if we look at the surrounding communities, a lot of the surrounding communities have all of the clerks are, elected. And those offices do a variety of things. For my conversations with a few of our local, elected clerks, is that they also provide, direct resources. And it's something that I, hope to bring into the office, hope to provide more access to our community, and also, provide resources. Mhm.
I want to follow up a little bit here, since we have time, since we've got fewer candidates with us. In the policy arena, there was the Evanston Voter Initiative the other year, which failed to make the ballot and get on its way to implementation. I don't personally have a position on it and didn't get involved with it. There may have been some karma, though, that entered this race when one of the organizers, whose Evanston Voter Initiative that got successfully bumped one of the candidates for city clerk from being on the ballot. So it seems to have entered subtly the conversation in this race, which gets me to, do you think it should be easier for citizens to have this direct pathway to enact ordinances in town through referendums and enact change in that form? What is your take on the Evanston Voter Initiative and that sort of direct citizen action that's been proposed? And we'll start with Eddie.
So that sort of proactive approach is something that's unique to Evanston. Our residents are very much involved in the process of their government, and as a nonpartisan official, I think it's my duty to facilitate whatever the needs of the community at the times are. So if again, the city clerk's office is the hub for information, and if people want to come into our office to move forward a referendum that will help make, for example, elections a lot easier here in Evanston, I think it's my job as the record holder of the city to make those records more accessible. And so I do applaud and support those sort of initiatives. I think it's something that we need more of in our community. So that way, more of our residents can have a more hands-on approach on the way we conduct our local government and its activities. So ultimately, I hope that these sort of initiatives continue to move forward, and I hope that I'm able to facilitate the needs that present themselves at the time.
I think that its premise is exactly what we need. We have representatives and they represent the people. If we have a population that overwhelmingly supports a measure and it's not being reflected by our representatives, then it would be excellent if we could have some way to do that. I know there are some, we may have some statutory problems in getting that up right now, but I don't know that we can completely enact it here. I think that we will have to look for some state reforms. But again, yes, I think those reforms should happen because the EBI thing came up because we did not feel represented. We did not feel that people's voices were being heard. And you can do referendums, the public can put forward referendums that have no effect, that are not binding, to try to give some indication of public support. But again, that doesn't have a legal effect. It can only act to persuade. So and if I remember the referendum question correctly, it included that city council would have an opportunity to vote. They could deny it, and then you would have to bring it back up again. And then, if I remember correctly, they could not deny it the second time. It is a lot of work to get enough signatures to even have a referendum question up. The fact that the public has been able to repeatedly do that does indicate to me that we have that this feeling that the public has that we are not being heard or represented is big enough that we are wanting to change that. So I support. I support it.
Thank you. All right, Stephanie, you have 2 minutes on this question.
Yes, hi. I do support EVI. I think it's very important to have an avenue for people to become involved with their local government and to create policy around that. I would have organized years ago to have a policy for language access of like a in the books straight, policy. And, the initiatives like EVI help people create voter turnout and bring more people out to vote and become involved in their local government. This specific policy would have required 25 people to bring something before council, and council would have had the opportunity to turn it up or down. And at the end of the day, council is very much a representation of our community, and it wouldn't become an ordinance or become a right away. It would go through a process, but it would give Evanstonians an opportunity to have a voice and a direct avenue to create policy that reflects their values. And there are many initiatives that have started like this, like the legalization of marijuana and other other initiatives. And it's very much the policy allows for people to have a voice and create ordinances or policies that represent their values in our community. And we have a community that is active and involved and cares about their residents and their community, and hopefully we'll see how that initiative goes turns out in court. But I believe that it's important for us to have avenues for our residents to become involved. And being a person that had to collect more than 1,400 signatures, I know how hard it is to get on the ballot and how hard it is to run for office. And I think it's important that we give other people that opportunity.
I am not an expert on the Evanston voter initiative. I haven't looked at the language in the proposal. I am aware that it was voted down. I believe it was 2-1 when it was brought in front of the Evanston board, and I believe an appellate court upheld that. So I don't want to pretend that I'm an expert here. I do believe in referendums in general. I know that we have and have used non-binding referendums to great effect. I think that our electoral system is very effective. I love the idea that you're one individual citizen in Evanston can have a big influence on the city. I think that happens every year here. And I think that our council members and our mayor are very responsive to the citizens. But I also have to say that, our town is about 77,000 people. We have a budget of about $330 million. And it's fine if people who are angry or upset about an issue want to get it changed. And I actually support that. I think that's fantastic. But from what I understand about the Evanston voter initiative, I'm not sure that it would have made an effective law. And that's the best I can say because I didn't read the law and I'm very familiar with laws in general, but I'm not sure that it was well written. and that it would have made an effective law. But that's the best I can say about it. I'm sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that right now.
As you all likely know, there was a little bit of an uproar during candidate filing this election cycle when a number of candidates had their petitions challenged due to not enough information being provided about the position they wanted to run for, or failing to properly fasten their petitions with a binder or staple. During these times, happens every couple years, a debate often rages about whether the electoral board should err on the side of ballot access and fairness or operate strictly by the book.
Once a challenge comes before the electoral board, the strictly by the book applies at court. So if the electoral board makes a determination that is not strictly by the book, it will be denied in circuit court. I think I said appellate in circuit court, and you can appeal it. And I think we saw that. So I highly favor ballot access, and I actually discourage people challenging other people's petitions because, again, once it goes in front of the electoral board, they're under the same confines, or they are supposed to be, as a circuit court. Their area of discretion is pretty low, and those rules do actually have to be evenly applied. When they start becoming arbitrarily applied to different groups, that's when we see things happen that are inequitable. So sometimes we see people out of their discretion favor certain types of candidates and not others. So yeah, so the first step for ballot access is disfavoring challenges to go before the board. And if you are, I think that, or if you're part of a group that's bringing forward a challenge, that you should have your name on it if you're another candidate, and that people should know that. Let's see, is there another question? Oh, failing to properly fasten. I think the clerk's office can head that off at the start. We need to have all of the information out on the table and have photos of proper bindings. We can't advise, but we can educate, and we can have information available and resources available that people can look through on their own, and we can be there to pass them the paper. And that way we're really careful not to be advising.
In ways I am, the rules are in place to, and have been put in place to, avoid things like corruption. I think that is true. It has happened. That's the reason why rules are there. In many ways, I am by the rules person. But I also do believe that when the city or people who are employed by the city are misleading and unfortunately causing people to lose their ability to be on the ballot, then that is a whole nother conversation that we should have. The clerk is there to, and to instruct and advise, and hopefully that is something that I hope to do, to be able to increase ballot access, partner with organizations that believe and care about ballot access to make sure that people in our community remain on the ballot. We had 2 people of color who were running for office who were thrown off the ballot, and it's very unfortunate. Considering that we are a community who values people wanting to serve, we should make sure that we are doing everything that is possible in the clerk's office without providing counsel, because then you come into you're in uncharted territory there, and then you have things like people saying, well, he or she or told me how to do this, but making sure we're actively partnering with organizations and have a list of attorneys for people, pro bono attorneys that want to help candidates independently of who they are access ballots. So I hear information is key, accessibility is key, and resources are key.
Thank you.
I'm a big believer in ballot access. I have listened to this nonsense about binders and staples for more years than most of you have been alive. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think that these rules need to be rewritten. If they're still causing this much confusion decades after they're written, it means they're badly written. It also means that not just about binders, but all these other rules, if they're so unclear that we have to bring in attorneys to try to understand how the heck you run for office, the problem isn't the people running for office, it's the people writing the rules. I'm a professional writer. It is absurd that we go through this. When you get people who have gone to all the effort to try to run for office in this city, and then we kick them off for some, what essentially in law would be a misdemeanor. It's just ridiculous. And I have listened to this about these ridiculous binders and staple till I can scream. We need to rewrite these rules. This binder is good, this binder is bad. Good, bad. And the idea that the city clerk could be held responsible for telling someone that they're using the wrong binder and the city clerk could be fired or something is absolutely absurd. Are you kidding me? We want people to run for office. So obviously I feel very strongly about this. This is a farce. It's been a farce. It was a farce 40 years ago. It should be fixed at the most basic level. And if people want to run for office and they go out and they get petitions, they should be allowed to run for office. So that's how I feel about that.
Okay.
Yes, so yes, ballot access is important. And I believe that anyone should have the ability to run for office. I think the rules are there for a reason, but they're also there to be improved upon. And so I think it's worth exploring how we can better improve those rules so that way no one is kicked off the ballot for a silly thing such as a clipboard or a paper clip. And so I think that starts in my role as the city clerk's role is because they're the hub of information. It's producing information that is readily available for the public. It's having candidates guide accessible to the public. It's being able to direct people to check out the Cook County Clerk's website, to check out the State Board of Elections website, to see what they're saying on how to properly bind their petition. So that way, when they enter our office, they're already prepared and they don't have to worry about the feeling of having a little technicality kicking them off the ballot. A lot of people work hard, especially during this weather. It's cold, inclement weather, it's unfortunate. And they put in a lot of hard work into that process. And so they shouldn't be kicked off because of a technicality. And as clerk, I'll make sure that I am there every single day to ensure that people are being given the proper information, that direction to staff is clear, and that we avoid these instances in the near future. And so again, it's about providing resources and information so that way everyone has the ability to run for office.
What unique long-term vision do you have for our community that you'd like to carry out as city clerk? And as OPAL, want to add in, how will you achieve this through a racial equity lens?
So one of the things that is near and dear to my heart is community advocacy and community outreach. I plan to bring a renewed focus of community outreach into the clerk's office. And I also plan to making the office more accessible, providing language access. I think it is important that if we are going to have people use and amplify their voices, that we are amplifying the voice of every single community member, and especially those who have been underrepresented and ignored for many, many years. I, have been or an organizer and a community outreach person in many communities. And I have walked many, many streets in Evanston in every single ward. And I have personally seen people, and talk to people that don't understand that they have a voice and that they can use that voice to impact change in our community. And those are the exact people that we should be hearing from. Those are the people who we should be creating ordinances and policies around. And I plan to use those skills to make sure we are amplifying the voices of our community members, that we are doing community outreach, have a focus in community outreach, and that we are also providing accessibility. You know, if that means language, if that means technology, if that means moving the clerk's, well, not moving, but bringing the clerk's office to our community centers and events, you know, that's where I want to be, because those are the people that I want to hear from. And those are the people that I want council to be listening to and to be thinking about when they are passing ordinances and policies. Thank you.
I would emphasize, I believe, since the clerk is the local election official, I would focus a lot of energy on voting, increasing voter registration, increasing voter output, and increasing voter education for young people. And I think that's where you can see a lot of improvement in racial equity, so to speak. I think what we want to do is we want to get all young people in Evanston and the country, but all young people to see the value of voting. It's a lifelong skill that people can obtain, and that will affect them and their families and their communities for the rest of their lives. So I think by bringing in current and former elected officials, teaching young people the value of voting, how to vote, and explaining to them that it's through voting that lives are changed, that laws are changed, that policies are changed. And that really, as we can see from this last election, how the world has changed through voting. And I think your vote matters in America, your vote matters in Evanston. And I think we need to encourage and teach our young people and adults to vote, and if they have any questions, how to vote, and to strongly encourage that. And again, I think that the clerk's office is a problem-solving office. We need to answer people's questions. We need to solve people's problems. We need to reach out to the whole community, which I think actually Evanston does try to do. And I think as the clerk's office, I would make a point of reaching out to all the communities, the Black and Hispanic, Asian communities, the white communities, and seeing that everyone feels that they can approach the clerk. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And so for me, you know, the vision for this community moving forward, it aligns with my priorities. It's about services. It's about making sure that our resources and information are accessible to everyone, including our underserved communities. It's about transparency, and it's about civic engagement. And so to me, I'll make sure that I continue to produce information, make it accessible to everyone, but at the same time, implement a language access policy that will allow me to produce information in Spanish so that those that face a language barrier can learn as well what's happening with the city and within the organization. With transparency, I want to make sure that people know how to use the FOIA process to seek public records. I want to see police records integrated back into our office. And I also want to do more advocacy in the community, more civic engagement, and that includes partnering up with the organizations, some of which I've mentioned already, to do voter registration drives to ensure that people are participating in their civic duty. Over the last 4 years, you know, I have served this community as the deputy city clerk. I've done all the core responsibilities. I know what it takes to move that office into the future. You know, when people go into that office, they see me, and that's something that they will continue to see if I'm elected. A clerk that is accessible, that is responsive to the needs, and is an advocate for transparency and more civic engagement.
My unique long-term vision is that we open up government so that we have no shadows left anymore, no places where decisions are made and public business is conducted that we can't find out about, or that we're provided misleading information or outright dishonest information. And that sort of access, with the few exceptions that are already under statute, is absolutely critical to equity, including racial equity, because when we have, what we don't know are the things that harm our most vulnerable populations. And we cannot hold our officials responsible and accountable if we don't know that information from the start. And that has been the barrier to equity, and particularly racial equity, because so much of it, we are given symbolic speech or, again, just incorrect information where those objectives were not intended to be met from the start. There were no benchmarks. There was no follow-up, where the things that the government really does want to get done, they do, and they do it quickly. You can see how that access to government and to action changes so quickly. If you have a lot of money, if you are white, if you are cisgender, I mean, across the board, government was built on white supremacy. And if we don't know all the facets of those, we can't dismantle all of those systems that keep it in place. And the public has to be part of that. It's a social ill we need to remedy by getting community solutions, getting all stakeholders in there so that we can think of real policy solutions that will solve these problems and take away those policies that just perpetuate that harm. Thank you again for having me.